Hello, and welcome to another episode of Movies, they're pretty good. I'm your host, Travis Dudding, and this week I'm doing something a little bit different. I'm not going to go beat for beat on a movie like I usually do. Basically, what had happened was I got very busy. I am a student. I'm a full-time student right now, and basically I put a lot of work into a specific movie and figured that I might as well just cover that movie on this podcast. But rather than just like going through the movie like I usually do, I'm basically just gonna riff off of my homework that I did for this movie. The class is media aesthetics, so basically I had to like fully break down the movie Chinatown. Roman Polanski. Nothing weird about that guy. No, like yeah, Roman Polanski is a piece of shit. Like, I'm just going to get that out of the way. Like, I don't like him as a human being. I think he deserves to have been punished for what he did and what he got away with. And it sucks that a lot of good directors, writers, and so on defend him, because I don't think you need to defend the person. I do believe that there is, like, a separate the art from an artist, you know? And I also believe that everybody has their own tolerance of that, you know? Like, I'm not saying everybody has to do that, you know? If you don't want to listen to Michael Jackson because of what you believe that he did, like, or what you know that he did, then don't do it, you know? You don't have to. And if some people do because they had that, like, you know, that's like, oh, I like have this strong connection to these songs, these movies, whatever, before I found out about this, you know, and it's just hard for me to separate that. Like it's hard for me to stop consuming this specific media because of that. And that's fine too, you know, and it's just like, you don't have to defend the person just to defend your enjoyment of a piece of art that happens to be made by a shitty person. And probably won't come as too much as a surprise. Most people that make art are shitty people. They just are, you know, and just people in general are bad. So, you know, it sucks that I'm not going to like say that like Roman Polanski's a good person. He's not, but he has made some good movies. And luckily this one, like a lot of the good stuff that came out of Chinatown, like isn't because of him directly. Like, he is a good director and he did direct this well, but it's more so the script. Like, it is widely known as like the world's best script ever written or whatever. Like, I don't know. But Robert Towne, he's the screenwriter on this one. So yeah, without further ado, I'm just gonna like read off of what I've written, like pre-written. So it might sound a little like wooden. I'm going to try not to sound wooden, like I'm just reading off of a thing. And I will like interject if I want to elaborate on something, because basically I just wrote this like 9-page thing for this class, and I don't want it to go to waste, like just be read by one person, you know? Like I'm proud of it. Like, I'm not saying I'm a great writer, but it's a lot of work that I put into this. So like, I just want more people to hear it and hear my thoughts on it. And I'm be curious to see, like, let me know, like, after this episode comes out, it's like, if this is a better, like, not that I'm going to like write an essay and read it out loud every single week, but is this a better format where I'm giving more insight into it, and rather than just going through a movie beat by beat and explaining it when you could just watch the movie, like, you know what I mean? All right, so let's get into it. Chinatown, 1974, I believe. All right. Chinatown is one of those films that I had heard about for years before actually getting a chance to see it. And there are many that like fit this same qualifier. Some of them live up to the hype, while others don't, you know? This is luckily one of those films that does live up to the praise. Despite the controversies surrounding the director, Roman Polanski, which I already went over, it's important to separate the art from the artist, and while the directing is brilliant, there are many more pieces to the puzzle. With great performances from an amazing cast, including Jack Nicholson, Faye Dunaway, and John Huston, and an impeccable script from Robert Towne, it's no wonder this film is so well regarded. Now that all that surface stuff level is out, now that all that surface level trivia is out of the way, see this is another reason this is gonna fail, is because I can't read out loud. I'm so bad at reading out loud. So bear with me here. I'm so sorry. Now that all that surface level trivia is out of the way, let's dig deep into what makes this film work so well. Now, this next section, I'm going to go over like the protagonist of the film. So the obvious answer when asked who the film's protagonist is would be Jack Nicholson's character, Jake Gittes. Referred to by every interview, documentary, and article I've ever seen regarding the film as a hard-boiled detective, Jake Gittes is the character whose eyes we viewed the story through. He's the audience surrogate, and we are experiencing everything through him. However, I would like to make the case that the real protagonist may be Faye Dunaway's character, Evelyn Mulwray. It really is her story, and Jake is just along for the ride, trying to put the pieces together. The story and mystery all revolve around her. It's her that gets the big reveal at the end. So to me, I would refer to them both as protagonists. But if the question is whose story is it, I would pick Evelyn, especially since it is her story that concludes with the conclusion of the film itself. One could even go so far as to pull the LA is the real main character trick, but I wouldn't go that far. While I do believe that LA is a vital part of the plot and a major part of the story at large, it's more just the setting in this case. The story genre. Chinatown has many genres within it, the most apparent being crime. So, to make it easier, I'll break it down by subplots, giving each their own genre. I would say that the A plot of this film is the realization of how deep the corruption runs through the city and just how much control John Huston's character Noah Cross has over the city. While there are elements of political and crime genres within the plot, since we are viewing this plot through the eyes of Detective Jake Gittes, the real genre here is humanity. It's Jake's loss of faith in humanity that we see as he tries to avenge the death of Evelyn. With the voice of reason, Walsh, the other detective, literally stepping in the way to tell him, "Forget it, Jake, it's Chinatown." The iconic line that everyone knows. We see it in Jake's eyes. At that moment, he knows that there is nothing he can do. The B plot is Evelyn's story. And while I do believe this is the main story, I put it as the B plot because it lives within the overarching theme of the A plot and ultimately resolves earlier than the A plot. Because just from what I've learned in this class, the A plot is whatever resolves last. Like whatever the last resolution is, that's your A plot. And then it just descends down from there. Whatever gets resolved right before that, B, C, D, E, And there's no like limit to how many plots can be within a movie. But yeah, that's how that works. It ultimately resolves earlier than the A plot. This plot I would categorize as the domestic genre. This entire plot is about her broken home life. Not to say that there isn't more to her character, there is. But all story points are domestic based. It's the supposed affair that her husband is having, brought to light by the call girl pretending to be her, that kicks off this plot. Then her husband is found dead, fracturing her domestic situation even further. Then we find out she is in contact with the supposed mistress from before. It is then revealed that she is not a mistress at all, but her daughter by way of the incestuous rape of her father, Noah Cross. And that's a heavy reveal, The story comes to a tragic end when she is confronted by her father, who is trying to take her daughter/sister away. She shoots him in the arm and attempts to drive away, only to be gunned down by the corrupt police officers that are in her father's pocket. It is wholeheartedly a domestic tale, albeit a very bleak one. Just to step in for a sec, the reveal that that is her daughter / sister is crazy because Jack Nicholson, Jake Gittes, is confronting her because he doesn't know the whole story, but he knows that she's lying about who this woman is, because it's okay, if this is your dead husband's mistress, why are you talking to her? Why are you protecting her? Why won't you let me talk to her? All this stuff, so he knows that there's something fishy, but he just doesn't have all the cards, and so when he does confront her, it's I know you're lying, who is she? She's my sister. And then he slaps her because he also at this point believes that she murdered her husband. She didn't, you'll find that out later. But so it's it's kind of it's kind of bad that he's slapping a woman around, but then also it's well, if it's a gray area. It does take place in the 30s and was made in the 70s, so we've come a long way since then, I'll just say that. But yeah, and then when she's just she's my sister, and then slap, she's my daughter, slap, she's my sister, slap, daughter, slap, she's my sister and my daughter, don't you get it? Are you too stupid to realize that? And then at that point, he obviously feels bad, one, that he was slapping her around, but two, that's such a heavy, dark, and terrible thing to find out, when you're just putting all that together and then you're just stuck with that, wow, that I had no idea that's what you were going through, you know what I mean? So yeah. Moving on from there, the C plot of the film revolves around the city planning and water routing in LA. This is squarely in the political genre, as it is entirely regarding power, laws, regulation, and city planning. This plot begins early on in the film, before we are even aware that it is an important part of the story. When Jake has been hired for the red herring case of Hollis Mulray's infidelity, he goes to a town hall meeting being conducted by Mulray. And it's here that we get to see the citizens and farmers in outrage over the lack of water. While there is a drought, the real problem is that the water in the San Fernando Valley is being siphoned to the city rather than the citizens of the valley. We eventually learn that in order to block a new dam from being built, water from the reservoir is being dumped directly into the Pacific Ocean. Our first hint of political corruption. The ultimate resolution of this plot, which has its roots in actual Los Angeles history, is the reveal that Noah Cross has had a bill passed to incorporate the valley into the city of Los Angeles, effectively making that water source for the city only, cutting off the rest of the valley. Now, as I said before, the overall genre of the film would appear to be crime. While crime does run through the veins of most of the plot lines, it's mainly sidelined to the D plot. The D plot is the mystery of who killed Hollis Mulray. This plot begins with the reveal that Mulray is dead, obviously. Jake has gone to the reservoir to talk to him, only to arrive as the police are hoisting his corpse out of the water. While the initial report is that it was either an accident or a suicide, Jake and us as an audience know better than that. The investigation is kicked off, ending with Jake finding Mulray's broken glasses in the pond at his home, leading him to the conclusion that he was murdered in his own home and dumped in the reservoir. Jake then confronts Cross about this, getting confirmation that it was him, although the confession means nothing with Cross owning the police. And also, there's the fact that it's another red herring altogether, that those aren't even Hollis's glasses. And I think I do cover that later. They're Cross's glasses, like the ultimate antagonist of the film. So yeah, now I'm going to break down the presentation style. presentation style, for those of you that don't know, is like the subgenre, basically. Because, a lot of times you'll see like, oh, musical as a genre, but it's not really a genre, because you can have a musical that's comedic, you can have a musical that's dramatic, you can have a horror musical, all these like different ways you could present a musical. So the musical is just the presentation style, it's the style of film. So that's kind of the difference between genre and presentation style. So when it comes to the presentation style of Chinatown, I am torn between two options. Therefore, I will explore each. Starting with history. Chinatown is a period piece, as it does take place 37 years before the film's release. 86 years before today, although that bears no weight on whether it's a period piece or not. While the story itself is fictional, it is set among actual historic events that took place. Los Angeles did actually incorporate the reservoir in the valley into its borders, as well as the length of the LA River to its endpoint at the Pacific. Oh my God. This is why, if you look at the shape of LA, like the actual, not LA County, but the LA city limits, it's like very large at the top, like this big bubble, which is the valley. And then like the little tiny dot in the middle is the actual like city, like downtown with the high rises and everything. And then it's this long strip that goes down to the ocean. And that's just so they could like own the entirety of the water, like all the way down from start to finish, basically. So yeah, this is all based in reality. And this was done for the same reason as it was in the film. And as Noah Cross puts it, either you bring the water to LA or you bring LA to the water. And so that's why it's just like, well, then we have all of the rights to this water if we own it, basically. And we don't have to give it to anybody because it's LA's water, Whether this was done in the same corrupt fashion in reality as it was done in the film, I do not know. But the fact remains that this film at least presents itself as a history film. And also the reason that like a history film would be a presentation style rather than a genre is because you could have a historical horror film, you can have a historical comedy. You have, the same reasons I said before with musical, just replace it with history, Now the other presentation style I want to throw out there is high art. But the reason I am conflicted with this is that A, high art is such a subjective term, and B, does the film just feel artistically superior due to it being made in a time period where so many classic and highly regarded films were made? Basically, do I myself have an internal bias towards cinema of the 70s? I do, however, think that it would be hard to find someone who didn't think this film has artistic merit, which is ultimately what leads me to vouch for that as a high art film. The difference between high art and pop culture, or pop art, gets blurred with age, in my opinion. Looking at a list of films from the same year, there are a few that would easily get thrown in the high art category and no one would bat an eye. Take, for instance, The Godfather Part 2, the same year, 1974. However, cases could be made now for many of the films made that year that would not have been considered high art at the time. I'm sure no one in 1974 would have considered films like The Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Young Frankenstein or even Blazing Saddles as high art. Within their respective genres and styles, they each set a blueprint and standard that most films came after have tried and failed to meet. Now, I'm not saying that definitively these films are high art, just that the case could be made now that wouldn't even be considered at the time. But what sets Chinatown apart from other films is its auteur style, its attention to detail, and the fact that it hits the mark in every category. Great script, both in story and dialogue, puts it above the average film of the time and of today. The directing is superb, it's shot beautifully, and the set design is also great and faithful to the time period. All in all, I do believe that this film to be high art. But yeah, like, to go back to what I said about the other films of the time, you look at any horror list, they're gonna be putting Texas Chainsaw Massacre high up there. And if you compare it to horror that comes later, like, you could say that it's like it has artistic merit compared to like newer stuff, you know? Like, I would consider, and the Ring isn't even a current film anymore, but you take 1974's Texas Chainsaw Massacre versus 2003's The Ring. Which one would you consider art, and which one would you just consider a genre film, you know? Anyways, moving on. Image systems. This is a strong film with many image systems, not just one. And so, for those of you that don't know, an image system is something. It's basically like a visual theme that plays throughout the film. Like for instance, this one is about one of the main ones is water, and there's like random, like all throughout the movie, like in the background, like, oh, like you can see the ocean in the background, or they're talking about water even though they're not directly talking about the plot points that deal with the water. They're just mentioning it, or, you know, just stuff like that. It's kind of hard to explain without me showing you visually, but it's just basically sometimes subtle, sometimes on the head references to a plot point throughout the film. Okay, now that that's out of the way. This film is a strong film with many image systems, not just one. While I do believe there are more, I will focus on the two that shine through the most to me. The first being the most obvious, the image system of water and drought. From the beginning, it seems like the main drive of the film is going to be this water drought plotline, which of course gets sidelined towards the end. However, the image system stays throughout. There are many on-the-nose examples. The scene at the beach, which happens at 10 minutes and 14 seconds, where Jake has followed Mulray to spy on him. Also where it is revealed that there is some corruption surrounding the water district. Because it's at this scene where Jake has followed Mulray to just like spy on him, because at this point all he's thinking about is this fake infidelity claim. So he's following him around just to like see what his like day to day is, and Mulray is like, he's going to the dried up LA River, and then he goes to the beach and he's just kind of standing there on the shore, just kind of hanging out by the tide pools, and then after the sun goes down, all this water starts coming out of the pipes and just getting dumped into the ocean, and you find out that the city is basically dumping this water there. That way they can make it look like I'm trying to remember what the exact thing that they're trying to say is, but I think they're trying to make the appearance that there isn't enough water to go around when there is. So basically it's a drought that for the most part they've created. And I mean, California is famous for droughts. Like that is like an actual thing, but it's a little bit of an invented one. It's like, it's a real drought, but it's not as bad as they want you to believe it is, because they want to have control over the water and they want to use this as a leverage piece, basically. Okay. Yeah. There's also a point where Jake jokes that about Mulray having water on the brain. That's at 13 minutes and 19 seconds. And cuts to another stakeout at the pond in Echo Park. And obviously it's at the pond, so more water, you know. And for the drought aspect, there are numerous shots of the dry riverbed, including one at 8 minutes and 20 seconds, and of cars overheating, like the one at 16 minutes and 40 seconds. However, a more subtle example is when Jake observes a series of freshly developed photographs of the main players in the water scandal, Hollis Mulray and Noah Cross. Since these photos are newly developed, they are still visibly wet. And when Jake is holding them, in my opinion, this is the best sample of water image system in the film, or at least my personal favorite, because they didn't have to show, like, they could have just like, oh, like these just got developed and he hands them some photos that are dry, you know what I mean? But they went out of their way to make them like still in the solution, so they're still wet. You know, so that's definitely on purpose, because you wouldn't add a new prop for no reason, basically. Because the simplest thing is just like, oh, here's those pictures, and he hands them the pictures. But you have to go out of your way to be like, oh, these like they need to be wet because, you know, we need to be subtly thinking about water because this is a water plot line, basically. It's really smart to me. I don't know if you guys would feel the same, but next one and strongest image system is the concept of seeing the wrong thing, false seeing, or looking in the wrong place. This one I will cover more in the next section, though, as it is the film's driving metaphor. Some less prominent, though still important, image systems are the overall political corruption and its acceptance as necessary, and the image system of sex, specifically the negative or darker side of it. The two examples of the political image system that I noticed come in at the 17-minute mark, and again at the hour and 3 minutes mark. The first one is when Jake is at the barbershop, the same scene where we see the car overheating. In this scene, Jake is confronted by another patron of the barbershop about the ethics of his line of work, because he's a private eye. You know, his whole job is spying on people, catching people in the act of cheating, stuff like that, you know. So this guy's like, hey, like, some living you have, basically. And then, of course, Jake gets offended and defensive about it, and flips the question on the other man, asking him how he sleeps at night evicting families from their homes, because he works for like he either works for the bank or something, but he deals with mortgages and stuff. So this is right coming out of I think right in the middle of the Great Depression. It's 1937. Because I feel like the Depression ran right into World War II, or at least pretty close. But yeah, 1937, evicting people from their homes. You know, it's like, hey, like, if you have a problem with the ethics of my job, like, why don't you look at yourself? Like, how do you sleep at night? And he's got a good point there, you know? Like, points could be made about both of them, like, towing the line of ethics, but, you know, it's kind of like you got to do what you got to do, and that's kind of the key point, I believe. Now, while neither of these jobs are political, the key point is that it's about accepting the status quo of this dirty work, and where each person draws a line on what level of unethical activity is acceptable, and whether or not the ends justify the means. So the second example comes when Jake is interviewing Noah Cross, where Cross says, "You may think you know what you're dealing with, but believe me, you don't." Jake laughs, and when asked why he's laughing, says, "It's what the DA used to tell me about Chinatown." So right here, a little bit of context for that. So Jake used to work, he used to be a cop, and he worked in Chinatown. That was his jurisdiction. And they don't go into detail on what happened, but something happened that he didn't like, and he tried to, like, probably something dirty was going on, and he tried to fix it. It went wrong. It backfired, and like with his guilty conscience, he just decided not to be a cop anymore and decided to be a private eye, basically. And that's the other thing is that, for more context, like, this is 1930s LA, Chinatown. It's not like you're going to have any cops speaking the language, no one's going to be bilingual back then. It's very rare. Probably a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? Just a lot of ignorance and prejudice, racism, and everything going on back then, and from what I saw in an interview talking about this, is that the key thing was, with that language barrier, it was easy to, one, take advantage of people, and two, to like let gray area, dirty work, any of that stuff kind of just go by, because you could use the well, we didn't know because we didn't, we don't speak the language. You know what I mean? Yeah. So yeah, a lot of people got away with a lot of stuff, basically. It's a great example of how Jake is used to not asking too many questions about shady business that he's not involved with, basically like just looking the other way. But the difference is that Jake is standing up and deciding not to ignore the darkness that lies beneath the surface. So it's basically like he used to just let things go and like not speak up about injustice, and now he's like trying, basically. Lastly, in terms of what I picked up on, is the image system of sex and the darkness that sometimes surrounds it. The film immediately opens with an example at the 2-minute mark, like right after the opening credits. Here we have a man reviewing a set of photographs of his wife having sex with another man. While we do not know the whole story of their love life, we get that there is darkness surrounding it because there is infidelity going on. There's also some instances of sexual jokes in inappropriate situations and places, such as the workplace. At 18 minutes and 31 seconds, Jake retells a sex joke to his coworkers in front of, unbeknownst to him, a woman who is standing behind him, unamused by and likely uncomfortable with the joke. While the stakes are on the lower end, considering the eventual reveal of the sexual trauma endured by Evelyn Mulray, it's still a good example of like a toxic masculine work environment where they're like telling inappropriate jokes and who cares if anyone's uncomfortable, that type of thing. You know what I mean? Which is surprisingly progressive for a 70s film, I would say. But yeah, a little more subtle example comes at the 1 hour, 2 minute, 40-second mark, when Noah says he wants to make sure Jake isn't taking his daughter for a ride, so to speak. And then he says, financially speaking, in quotes. His smirk and his chuckle when he says this implies that he means financially as opposed to sexually. While on the surface, this is a somewhat innocent, and without knowing the full story when we first view the film, it may go unnoticed. But knowing the full story has me leaving this moment with a bad taste in my mouth. So basically, the full story is that this is the man who raped his own daughter, and she became pregnant. Like, we don't know how many times this happened. It's implied that it probably wasn't just the one time, and so it's like to have like this weird is putting it lightly, this terrible like sexual relationship with your daughter, and then to make a sexual joke about her is just very unsettling, to put it lightly, I guess. Yeah, like I said, bad taste in my mouth. But at the time, you don't know that that's the case, so it is just like you know. But then you on a rewatch, you're like, oh, yikes. We now come to what I believe is the main image system and the metaphor of the entire film, and that's false sight. The film throws a fair amount of red herrings at the audience and our surrogate, Jake Gittes. Jake is always looking in the wrong place or paying attention to the wrong thing. The entire water plot is itself a red herring because while it does involve political corruption, it turns out to only be a distraction from the true mysteries: who killed Mollis Mulray and why. One example is when Jake notices a key piece of evidence very early on at 27 minutes and 50 seconds, but gets distracted when Evelyn comes out to talk to him. The evidence itself are the bifocal glasses of Noah Cross. Like I said before, like we think that it's Hollis Mulray's glasses, but they are those of Noah Cross, which prove him to be the murderer of Mulray, and we see them before we or any one of our main characters know that Mulray is even dead, let alone murdered. Then when the glasses eventually are found, Jake puts it together that Mulray was killed at his home rather than at the reservoir. However, he jumps to the wrong conclusion, thinking that Evelyn had killed him. Then, to top it all off, he was wrong about whose glasses they were in the first place. Then, of course, there is the fact that he followed Mulray around and documented a non-existent affair, taking pictures of Mulray and Catherine, Evelyn's daughter, believing her to be the mistress and misreading the innocent cheek kiss that he captures on camera at 16 minutes and 14 seconds. The metaphor is shown visually throughout as clouded vision, obscured vision, and eyes that don't see. Hollis Mulray's dead eyes at 33 minutes and 21 seconds. This is when he gets like pulled up. His dead body gets pulled out of the water and his eyes are like wide open. The literal veil over Evelyn's eyes at 45 minutes and 50 seconds. Jake's sunglasses at an hour and 8 seconds. And the aforementioned broken bifocals at 1 hour, 53 minutes, 25 seconds. My favorite, however, is at 43 minutes and 13 seconds. I'm sorry for the all these random timestamps. They were necessary for the thing, but I just don't want to reword it in the moment, because I feel like that's going to be disastrous. When we first see Jake with the giant bandage over his nose after being cut by one of Cross's minions at the reservoir. What this image signifies, in my opinion, is that the answers that Jake Gittes is looking for are right in front of him, or, as the saying goes, plain as the nose on his face. What I love about this image system is that it not only accentuates the A plot, but B, C, and D as well. Jake knew that there was corruption, but he couldn't face it. A plot. Had the wrong idea about who Catherine was. B plot. He completely missed Mulray's connections to Cross and Cross's connections to the Water District. C plot. And he had the key to the mystery of Hollis Mulray's murder right before him, before he even knew that there was a murder. D plot. So, as I stated before, Jake Gittes is our audience surrogate. We view everything through his eyes. He not only represents us, however, but the frustration felt by everyday people, the ones in power, the ones not in power, like the 99%, basically. The frustration that no matter what they do, they can't change the system. The film doesn't hit the class system and differences between the classes much, but it goes hard on the idea of power, how it is abused, and how they tend to get away with it. Money and power rule over everything. It lets you control the water source of a major region, lets you decide who gets it and who doesn't. It also helps you get away with murder, rape, and incest, unfortunately. Noah Cross is the representation of these powerful people that get away with whatever they want to suit their own needs and interests. Evelyn represents the victims of these abusers of power. In the film, she is literally a victim of her own father's abuse, but rather than remain a victim, runs away from home as a teen, returning with the hope of keeping her daughter from the same fate. She fights her way out of her bad situation, but dies in the end, much like many who die fighting for the rights and the rights of others. Their own rights or the rights of others. To put it the most simple way, Noah Cross is the tyrannical upper class. Evelyn is the directly oppressed but fighting lower class. And Jake is the middle class who is affected and attempts to help, but ultimately gives up out of frustration because they aren't affected enough to have to fight for survival. To them, it's a right versus wrong, not a life versus death fight like it is for the lower class. This was how I interpreted the deeper meaning of the film, and I fully realized that I am viewing the film with a 21st century lens, which may lead me to conclusions that weren't originally intended. But that is what is so beautiful about true art and true cinema. We each take something different away from the film or a work of art. That's not to say a film can't be created with a specific goal or purpose in mind, but even in those cases, the experience is different for each person. In the case of Chinatown, there are and will be people who see a masterpiece, those who find it boring, those who think it's good but not the best, and those who can't get over the hurdle of Roman Polanski as a person. In the end, deep meaning or not, Chinatown accomplishes the goal every film should aspire to achieve, being a damn good movie. So yeah, that's what I wrote about it. But yeah, like, it's a really good movie. Watched it a few times for this, obviously. I had seen it before. One time before. Like, I had to write this paper on it. But yeah, great movie. Great movie. So yeah, like, thank you guys for sticking through this. I hope this wasn't a terrible experience. But yeah, let me know on Instagram. Like, it's at movies they're pretty good with no punctuation. Yeah, let me know what you guys think of this style of episode. All right. If you want me to keep going like this and stop wasting your time retelling a movie that you just watched. But yeah, let me know. And if it sucks, then also let me know, and I won't do this ever again. All right. Well, thank you guys for listening, and I hope everyone has a good week. And thanks for sticking through when I took a week off. Thanks for understanding. If you did, I don't know if you did. But yeah, have a good week. Thanks. Bye.